This week on the Dry Bar Comedy Podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm trying to be a stand-up comedian. Would you mind if I tried some jokes on you? And 3 people go, yes! I go, sorry! And
Welcome to the Dry Bar Comedy Podcast. It's me, Taylor Nielsen. Excited to be doing the show just on my own. Lonely. The sentinel of the Dry Bar Comedy Podcast. Jordan Macon is somewhere. Who knows? I don't know. Please, if you miss him, let him know in the comments. And especially if you don't miss him, put that in the comments, because that's really what I'd like to hear. Might as well jump to our guests today because they're so gosh dang good. Let's see a clip and see who it is.
So when I was a freshman, first year, 4-degree cadet at the Air Force Academy, I called my mom every Sunday. And then on Monday, an A-10 fighter plane crashed in Wyoming. Pilot survived, but the plane crashed in Wyoming, which, I don't know if you know this, is not Colorado Springs, Colorado. My commander calls me into his office Tuesday morning, and he says, Cadet Sarduy, stand at attention. I was like, yes, sir. I was ready to go. Whatever he wanted me to do, I was ready. He said, I'm going to play you a voicemail. And you normally only get phone calls on Sundays, but I need you to go call your mother and explain exactly what you do here. And I was like, oh, I don't want to hear this voicemail. This is going to be bad. This is going to be a bad voicemail. I don't want to hear. Here's my mom's voicemail, word for word. Boop. Is my baby okay? Oh, no, I saw the news with the plane crash, and there's my baby flying the A-10 Thunderbolt 6. I don't know the number. Please call me back. Click. She didn't leave her name or my name. We had to star 69 her, which is an old-timey phrase now.
Great. Okay, you know who it is. He's got 2 specials with Dry Bar, and they're adored across the internet. Millions of views. The first, Cuban Pilot, and then the second, worthy sequel, Airplanes in Broken English. Please give a warm welcome to Jose Sarduy.
hey, I talk now? Now I talk? Yeah. Okay. I know what to interrupt. Thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here. Dry Bar Podcast.
All right. Right above where you filmed your 2 specials.
I know.
You're here, you're back.
We're in the Angel Studios.
Right.
Somebody right now has headphones on and is listening to curse words. And going, nope.
Actively filtering out.
No.
I've always wondered about that job.
That's the most PTSD job in the studio. It's the only person in the studio, the editor, that cleans up. It's probably the only one that needs a therapist. Yeah. So many words.
Yeah.
Just let it out. Just let it out.
All the stuff I've seen, everything I've seen, you have no idea.
You don't even know. You don't even know the curse words I've seen. I've seen children say curse words. It hurts me inside. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, we're happy to have you back here at Angel Studios and Dry Bar Comedy. That clip right there, coming out of the gates.
Yeah.
That clip segues into a hilarious bit about inspection that's kind of gone wrong, but then right at the end.
Yeah, it's the whole Air Force Academy experience. Like that phone call, it's like word for word, because my sister, who is 11 years younger than me, so at the time, she's 7 years old, and she was standing next to my mom as she made that call. And she said my mom was very upset, and she dialed the number and called it. And when she hung up, my sister was like, Mom, you didn't leave your name. Or Pepe's name. They call me Pepe. You didn't leave Pepe's name. My mom was like, they'll know. They'll know.
and they did know.
They did know, because they immediately was like, well, this is probably Jose. Anybody else in the squadron wouldn't be somebody's baby. So, and then that leads into the inspection story, which, military academies, it's what I do with a story is I'll take it and I'll have something that's a very simple joke. Right, so this is an 8-minute fart joke, is what the inspection story is. Yeah. At its essence. But its setting in this one place is so unique, and it's a situation that is, I try to tell it as a story, and give you the whole picture of what is happening and whatnot. And I remember there are jokes that I have written that do not come out of the gate strong, right? So I see myself as a little league coach, and all of my jokes are my players.
Right.
And I'll put in a new player, and I'll be like, all right, you're batting seventh. Come on. And
Yeah.
And then they hit themselves with the bat. And I'm like, ooh, not ready. We need more practice. Get him out of the lineup, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other jokes that I put in batting ninth, and they hit a grand slam right away. And that's one of those jokes. It came out of the womb ready for prime time. I have not touched it much since pretty much its inception.
That's
I have
awesome.
touched it up in places, but there are other jokes that I will spend years trying to get funny and refining. And that one, I was like, well, this one's ready.
That's
I wrote
amazing.
it yesterday.
So did you have any misgivings about actually doing it because you were like, oh, this is a fart joke, I don't know how it's going to play with audiences, or you were confident in the story?
I wasn't thinking of like, okay, well, it's just going to be for TV, because I've done other TV appearances,
Right.
And I did that joke, and the producers were adamant, like, we are not putting an 8-minute fart joke on our TV show. And I was like, okay, but it's a crowd favorite, you know.
Yeah.
And then Dry Bar finally was like, yeah, we're gonna, and then they
Of
featured
course.
it. Not only did they clipped it out of the special, which got good views, and then they featured it, and as I predicted, it was popular,
right?
And it's not like I predicted it because, like, oh, ever since I wrote it, I knew it was going to be amazing. It's that I had done the repetitions. So I've done that joke 3,000, 4,000 times.
Right.
And within like 200 or 300, where it is just, I'm having to close the show with it because it's so strong, I go, yeah, this is probably going to be good. And, you know, all the stuff that they do in Hollywood where they have to focus group, right?
Yeah.
It's like a survey. Right? And what is true about surveys? Most people don't do them, right? So that's the one thing you can get from a survey that's definitive. Most people don't do surveys. So it's just a sample, and sometimes you hope that it's a good sample of everybody.
Yeah.
I'd already done all that work for them. I had tried this joke across the country in like 30 states, and it had just killed with different audiences or whatever. So I had done the focus group for them. And this TV show was like, nah, we're not putting it on. And Dry Bar was the first thing that put it up. And it did well. And so it kind of justified, like, you know, I kind of know what I'm doing in this business.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing I love about it too is you have it's like a great story on its own, because you set up this tension of like, you're going to get in trouble for the closet.
Right.
And then you add in these other, you know, funny elements, and then it's resolved in the end. It's just like, it's very satisfying.
Yeah. The
most
best
satisfying fart joke that I've ever heard.
And you don't even know the most satisfying part of it. I'll tell you right now.
I would hear, yeah.
I did it at my 20-year reunion from the Air Force Academy. And all of the jokes that night I did with specific names of all the people involved. So my roommate at the time said he was sitting at the table, and I was doing this joke, and he started sweating because he's a sweater. He started sweating.
Just like in the joke.
In his mind, he was like, please don't say my name. Please don't say my name, Jose. And then I used his name at the end. And an extra throwaway line. And the place erupted. The whole table was like, ah! And he was like, that's the culmination of that joke, right? I'd written it like 5 years prior. Eric had never seen that joke, and Eric got the full brunt that night in the 20-year reunion, and it was pretty great. So that was the end of that story for that joke. So
that adds the extra inside joke level, and that's something I really appreciate about your comedy. Is it feels like the way you introduce your family and your situation. It feels like I'm in your world,
right?
Rather than just hearing someone else talk about their life. It actually feels like you give the information in a way, the voices you do, it all creates this kind of cohesive world that, you know, I feels like I'm a part of when I'm
I got to that point, right? So I didn't start as a storyteller. I started trying to, you know, set a punch.
Right.
And I got so much experience at talking about things that most people don't know about. So most people have never been to war. Most people have never flown an airplane. Most people have never been to pilot training or been to a military academy. And so I had to very succinctly get the exposition so that they understood enough to get the punchline and then get the punchline. And if they were there, it was even easier for them, right?
Right.
So it was trying to get an inside joke to be a joke for everybody. And those
Yeah.
skills that I amassed in all my beginning years in stand-up, when I started switching into a storytelling format for almost all my jokes, it just helped. Like, I had the foundation to do those jokes. So now when I tell stories, I don't, like I did at the beginning, I would write 12 minutes and then I would try it. And by the time I finished, it was down to 38 seconds. I was like, well, I got a 38-second new joke.
Yeah.
And I wrote 12 minutes. Now I write the story, how I want to tell it, and then I populate it with punchlines.
Right.
And sometimes I edit parts out because I consistently can't write the punchline that fits.
Right.
But I always want to come back to that. I always keep thinking about it. And then one day I think of it. I'm like, it's back. Now it's no longer a 7.5 minute. Now it's an 8-minute joke. So all of that original stuff is what helped me get to the storytelling, which is what I do now almost exclusively. Is like anything I want to talk about, I put it as a story.
Right. And do you find writing recently that you're still mining older experiences, or you're more up to date with what you're doing now with your storytelling?
It's a little bit of both. So I tell stuff that has happened recently. Like last night, I was in Jordan Landing, and I did a private party for a construction company, and they hired me specifically because I'm bilingual, but nobody told me. So half the crowd didn't speak English. And so I was on stage. I was like, I'm not doing very well. I'm so sorry for this party. Maybe they didn't want a comedian or whatever. And then afterwards, they're like, half the crowd doesn't speak English. You did really great. I was like, that was good information to have before the set, because I've actually done jokes in Mexico and in Spanish and all
awesome.
that. And I was the warm-up comic for on Telemundo for the show The Voice, but in Spanish with kids, La Voz, kids, right? Which was one of the only 5 words my grandmother knew in English. Like she knew kids because I was on that show. So she knew hello, Jess, Michael, because it's my dad's name, Miguel, Michael, and then kids. Those are the only 4 words she knew, or 5. I don't remember the 5th one. It might have been like, okay.
Wow. How much work does it take to translate your act into Spanish?
When I first started, it was fascinating because the punchlines don't get the laugh as much as the setup. So you had to restructure the joke because of the different language structures. So
right.
The way that that a sentence is constructed in English versus the way that's constructed in Spanish. It was fascinating to me because I would get this laugh on the setup. I'm like, oh, this is going to do good. It's going to do good. And then I get to the punchline and they're like, and I'm like, what happened? And so I had to redo the joke in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's the same idea, but you have to adhere to the language, and then there's different dialects, right? So if you're doing a mostly Mexican crowd, there's different terms for different things. Whereas if you're doing a Caribbean Spanish crowd, there's different terms, and so that was a fascinating thing to get done. And I've done probably maybe 20, 25 shows in Spanish, and it's every time I'm up there, I'm always learning.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Is part of it kind of like you're translating it into another language? You have to be careful what words you choose because they have different meanings, and it might give away the punchline in the setup.
Yeah, well, like I'll give you an example. I was on tour with Al Madrigal, so I was opening for him in Atlanta, and he got it because he's Mexican, but his joke is all about, is like, do you speak Spanish? He's like, poquito, because he doesn't speak any, really.
Right.
And so we go to this Spanish Mexican station to advertise for him to come out to the punchline, the old punchline in Atlanta. And I basically talked most of the time.
Right.
And I was doing my jokes and it was getting laughs. And then there's the joke about the turtle, where my mom snuck a turtle into the United States
right.
in her bra. And I called it an ajustador, which is what Cubans call it, but Mexicans call it brasir. And so it's a totally different word, not even close in sounding. So when I said lo tenía en su ajustador, they all blinked. You know that I don't know that word. That's an adjuster in my mind.
Oh, interesting.
Which it is, but it's the chest adjuster.
Right.
To be nice on drive. And so I was like, ooh, okay, I gotta focus on different words. And then I did the chicken joke where my mom killed a chicken.
Right.
And that one immediately killed. But at the beginning, I expressed something about how my mom like I didn't mess with her because that's, because she killed a chicken with her brain. And that got the best laugh of the whole joke until the act out. So that was not even, that was like a throwaway kind of a setup punch, where it's just a chuckle before you go into the main laughs. And it was the main laugh when I did it in, I think I was in Cabo at a comedy festival. And so it was like all these lessons, like, okay, when I rewrite it, it's not just about saying it in Spanish. There are words and there is sentence structure to worry about. And then there's also the sensibilities of the culture. Like how does the culture tell jokes? And so I watched a lot of my buddies that were like Comedy Central Spanish comedians. Just to get more hints on like, oh, okay, I wouldn't have built that joke that way, kind of thing. And then go back to my act and change it around. So it was a fascinating exercise.
When you did that, or like tried to rewrite your stuff for a Spanish audience, did it at all like bring you back to speaking Spanish at home in your upbringing? I mean, you moved from Cuba at 3, right? Yeah. So were you speaking Spanish growing up at home?
Yeah, I still do.
Okay.
Yeah. My mom is like, she says, "Háblame en cristiano," which is speak to me in Christian. I was like, I'm pretty sure the Christians did not speak Spanish. I think it was Aramaic, but also Greek. So none of those are Spanish.
That's interesting.
So yeah, at home we speak in Spanish. My dad is always trying to work on his English, so I'll speak to him in Spanish and he'll talk to me in English.
Interesting.
So that's a little different. But mom, it's like, we speak English if there are English speakers in the house, to not be rude to them. But otherwise, we don't speak in English. So the interesting thing about it was, especially when I was doing Telemundo, I just turned everything into Spanish. So I had Spanish radio on. I had my GPS on Spanish. All the like the car displays, everything on my computer, all was in Spanish. So I was just kind of immersed. That I could be quick on the draw because I was the warm up comedian for the show. Right. And so that's when I discovered that the lady that does the voice for Google Maps in Spanish should have just she doesn't translate everything. Some things she says with an accent. Like there's no Spanish for boulevard.
Right.
So she would say, "Toma izquierda en San Toma Boulevard." It's like just like this excessive accent on the thing, and I was like, "That's unnecessary. You know how to say it in English. Just say it in English." And so that was interesting. But I think the big thing that got me when I was trying to move the act over was that a lot of the basic Spanish, so like the Spanish from Spain, proper grammatical thing, is what I lean on. It's the Spanish that everybody understands. And so when I tell the joke, I found the easiest way was to not rewrite it for each particular dialect, but to just do it in like the most basic Spanish I could, so that I wouldn't have to keep rewriting it every time. So it was the most efficient thing I could do. And then unfortunately that reduces some of the punch. Because for that particular culture. But if you have a mixed culture of people, then it gets a bigger laugh. So I would prefer being inclusive rather than, specific to one crowd.
Totally. Rather than doing a word that might be funnier to this specific group.
Right. It's almost like when I tell jokes for military members. So I'll do veterans events, and there'll be veterans there, but I don't cater the jokes just to them. So I have them laughing with the audience that has never served or, only knows that through like their dad, who doesn't really talk about their job. It's like, I see my dad in uniform when he comes home, but he doesn't really talk about what he did.
Right.
So it's kind of the same mentality. It's like, I'm always trying to get everybody laughing. There's comedians that make the back of the room laugh, which is, they tell jokes to make the other comedians laugh. Right. Which a lot of the time does not translate to the audience because we have a little bit of the darker sense of humor.
Totally.
I'm not that guy. I want the back of the room laugh too. But I want everybody laughing together. And so that's always been my philosophy.
Right. And that seems like it would be the hardest to do, is reaching everybody.
Yes, especially when you're doing open mics. Because guess who's at open mics?
Just comedians. Oh, yeah.
So you got to weigh it and like, all right, it make the comics chuckle.
But then when you do a weekend show,
let's try in front of a paid, regular civilian crowd. And then they get a big laugh, and to me, that's good enough. Hey, if the comedians are chuckling, I'm like, that's not bad.
Right.
And the rest of the audience loves it, I'm like, that's good. There are jokes that the comedians love, and the audience just chuckles. And I don't do a lot of those, but I keep them because that's for you guys.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
That's funny. So let's talk a little bit about your path to comedy. I guess we can't talk about that really until we talk about your upbringing in Air Force.
Yeah.
But so you come from Cuba, you're deported from Cuba at age 3.
People have said like, were you really deported? And I was like, technically we were, because my dad was let out of prison. He was released in 1977.
Right.
And we didn't leave for 3 years. But it was like a rough time. Like our family got spit on, and my dad couldn't get a job. My mom got fired from her job for being married to him, and we were trying to get out. So we had tickets, and we were going to fly to Jamaica, and then up to live with my godparents in Rochester, New York. And so that was the plan. And then the Mario boat lift happened, which if you've ever seen Scarface, which if Angel Studios could get Scarface out, I would be like, that movie would be 45 minutes long because it is loaded with curse words.
Yeah.
So that was how my family came in the Mario boat lift, which was essentially Castro said, hey, if you want to pick up your family, you can bring them down. Your minimum boat size is this, and you got to take whoever we put in the boat besides your family, and you get a limit to how many people. Because I think Carter had kind of opened the hey, whoever wants to come to the U.S. from Cuba, send them.
Right.
And so Castro just basically opened his mental institutions and prisons and sent all of them, and then among them were all the political prisoners. So my dad had been a political prisoner. And so they took away our tickets to Jamaica, and they said, you can't leave unless you go through the deportation process, essentially.
Man.
So getting kicked out through here. So it was like a bitter girlfriend. Like, you're not breaking up with me, I'm breaking up with you. So we got put in the internment camps and had to go through the whole
with
thing.
the prisoners and
So that's how we got to the U.S. And we got into Florida, and then we moved to Rochester, New York, just shortly after that to live with my godparents. So that was the path here. So technically, yes, deported. Although you kind of chose it rather than stay. So, but it is hey, get out. So I think that counts as deportation when your own country says get out. That's,
I'd say so.
And then I grew up in mostly Miami, Florida, but we lived in Rochester for about a year, and then we lived in San Juan, Puerto Rico for a year. My dad was just looking for jobs everywhere, and then we settled in Miami and a bunch of places. And then my parents divorced, and my mom married my stepfather, and then that's when I really settled and kind of had the most time in one place in Miami Springs, Florida.
Okay.
And then from there, that's when I went to the Air Force Academy. And all that time, what I discovered about my family was that humor was our way to get through stuff, right? Getting deported from your own country and then not being able to see your parents and your cousins and your aunts and uncles. It was hard, right? That is a hard thing, but we always joked about it. That's how we got through it.
That's cool.
And
were you finding you were kind of the family clown of the bunch, or
no? My mom was. My mom is funny. My dad's funny. My stepfather's funny too. He's more of like a dry humor kind of Will Ferrell kind of comedian. Like, he's really quiet, and then he pipes in, and you're like, what? Like, he's this very distinguished man, right? He was a Venezuelan fighter pilot, and he worked for Eastern for many years. And we were coming out of Spider-Man, and I was like, did you like the movie, Dad? He's like, yeah. Right, this old man doing this, right? Just made me laugh so hard. So everybody I was around was funny. And so I kind of osmosis picked
You were watching them do it and kind of learning what to do.
Yeah. And I never thought I would be a comedian because I was a nerdy kid and I was trying to be an astronaut. But I was inside joke funny. So I had the skills of the inside joke teller, and it was so extreme that, some inside joke tellers, people will listen and be like, oh, okay, I see what they're saying. Nobody ever, no, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Like the least accessible kind of comedy.
The least accessible inside joke teller of all time. But if we'd experienced something together, I could make you laugh retelling the story.
So it was kind of stories from early on that you were.
So that was a thing. And and I just weird when you don't care about the audience, when you care about the story.
Yeah.
I probably got laughs in an inside joke story very, sparsely distributed, but I needed to tell this part of the story. That was important to me. And as I got, into stand-up comedy, I go, that's not what's important.
Right.
You only tell that part if that part's going to get a laugh. But otherwise, why is it important to you, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have all the things that that would make me think I should be a stand-up comedian. And so when it finally hit me, I was, the astronaut program was not going to work out for me because turns out it's hard.
I can imagine.
I was not competitive. And I was kind of looking for something else. That's when it happened. I was in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. I was hanging out with a lady I was dating at the time, and I was introduced to her friends who had never met me before. And they all wanted to know about me, and I tried to tell jokes that I knew or something like that, and they were like, no, they were not having it. They wanted my inside stories, and I was like,
that she had told them about before.
No, just like about me.
Okay.
And I was like, all I have is inside joke stories, and they're not insiders. This is going to be bad. But I had just enough alcohol, the right level, right, where you're just a good pool player.
Yeah.
Right, where if you go past that, you like hit yourself with the stick. So I went for it, and I spoke for 10 minutes. I remember I spoke for 10 minutes, and one guy shot beer out of his nose. This lady fell out of her stool, like onto the ground. People around us started like talking less to their friends and kind of leaning in and listening to the story. I was killing it. At this bar. And never had I done that. Never had I been funny to strangers.
Yeah.
So that's when I went to the bathroom and I was like, "What was that?"
Yeah.
And that's when it was born, right there. So
really, and you just thought maybe I'll try stand up.
I wanted to look into it because I love stand up. I was a stand-up fan.
Okay.
And I was one of those fans in the audience. Like I was like just mesmerized by the comedian. And when someone heckled, I was like,
how could you?
This is a live performance. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And then when the comedian would put down the heckler, I'd be like, "You're so amazing. You're so amazing." I was just gushing with pride for them. So I always loved stand-up, but I didn't want to ruin the art form, right? I didn't want to be a non-funny person, which muddies the water, right? So
yeah. Did you feel like watching them? Like I have no idea how they do this.
I didn't know about writing, how you write the jokes, how you get to that.
Yeah.
I understood it was a different speech pattern.
Would you say that being an astronaut seemed more achievable than being a comedian?
No. Well, I didn't know what was required.
Right.
Once I looked into it, no. You can be a stand-up comic. Because it's except for like the big money jobs.
Yeah.
Where there's a big moat between like a working comic and then making big money. But just being a working comic is pretty meritocracy.
Right.
It's a merit-based situation. If you're funny, you're going to get work.
Right.
Unless you're like a super horrible human being. And even then, if you're funny enough, they're like, "Okay, I hate you, but get up there,"
Right.
And so I looked into what it took to write jokes, and everything I found out about stand-up was hard.
Yeah.
Most people suck at first. Like you don't get any laughs.
Totally.
You're just terrible at it. You have to spend nights like practicing every night, getting on stage, having people not laugh at you. You have to be out every night at the bars doing this stuff. Once you start working, you're like always gone. So you don't have any like consistent family life or home life. And everything I found out, I was like, that sounds awesome. Like, the things that everybody would hate, I was just like, that sounds great. I would love that. It's like, oh, you're just always in airports. I'm like, that's awesome.
You love airplane. I've loved going to the airport too.
Yeah. So I was like, they have really great like restaurants. I love that. So everything about stand-up I loved. And so I wrote for 6 months, and then I set up, New York Comedy Club, October 20th, 2003. Monday night, I went in. There were 3 hardened New York comics, and they were not having anything. None of my jokes hit. I got one legitimate chuckle. All 3 of them. And when it happens like that, they couldn't help themselves. They all went. I was like, that's it. I'm a comedian, right?
Right.
And that was it. I started going consistently after that. It helped that my airplane was so old in the Air Force that it was retiring. So its missions started dwindling, and we had less missions to go on. And so I had more chances to go to New York and practice. And I feel that I should apologize to anybody that I knew at the time or that I worked with, because I was so annoying. I'm aware of that now. I'm aware that I was annoying. I'd be hanging out with my friends, and I would say something funny, and then I'm like, oh, wait, and then I'd have to get a napkin and just break all conversation and write that down. Coworkers would see me coming, and they'd be like, I have to find something to do. And I learned that you didn't, spring it on them.
Right.
It took me a while to learn that. Social cues. Don't just spring jokes on people in mid-conversation.
You need a willing audience.
Yeah, and so that's why I apologize to any cashier around 2003 to 2004, because you were a captive audience.
You had a Cool Whip bit or something you were trying to
I think I'm the
check out.
reason we have those self-checkout things. They were complaining.
Walmart met and they're like, hey, we're losing cashiers left and right.
Accosting us with jokes that they wrote, and they're awful. Could we get some system? Like, we'll work on it. And so I remember I had coworkers, and when I first started, I probably had like a 1 in 50 success rate.
Right.
So they would just, you could see themselves gird themselves for an awful experience. When I was like, can I try a joke on you? And they're like, sure, go ahead, Jose. And when it hit, it was like, that was funny. You wrote that. Like, it was painful. So again, public apology to anybody in my life at the time.
That was what,
2003 to 2004. Yeah. Wow. But I was able to generate material quickly.
Just by doing it
just over and over and annoying everybody that I knew.
I would never have the courage to do that.
Sometimes the courage is not the problem. It's just I don't like making people uncomfortable if I know they're uncomfortable. But I was not reading the social cues. Like, I heard that Bernie Mac, when he was in Chicago, he would get on a soapbox in the park and just start talking to people walking by. Right? That's how he started. And that's how he got so fast and really good. So one time I was on the train we were going from Philly up to New York. And it was kind of empty. And I stood up and I go, hey, everybody, I'm trying to be a stand-up comedian. Would you mind if I tried some jokes on you? And 3 people go, yes. I go, sorry. And so I was like, I am not Bernie Mac, is what I discovered that day.
That's not what you picture when you're like, I want to be a stand-up comedian. Yeah. Like, I'll tell my jokes and people will love it.
No. At first, it's very rough. I mean, I have a friend who said he went up the first time and killed. And he's like, I'm a natural. I'm the next Dave Chappelle, whatever. And then he had his second show. And he was like, after that second show, I ate it so bad, I did not do stand-up for 3 weeks because it hurt me so hard. I was like, I guess it's better to start terrible and then move up rather than start at this high and think you're good. So
right. I think that happens with a lot of comics is you bring, maybe to a bringer show, you bring all your friends.
Oh, bringer shows. Oh, my goodness. I lost so many friendships. I remember my friend, we did a bringer show and it was so bad. It was 2 hours and 45 minutes of bringer show. We missed the train, so we had to take we had to go sleep in the train station and ride the early morning train back.
Your friend did too?
Yeah, all 3 of us.
Oh my gosh.
And my friend was like, never invite me to a show ever again. Do you understand me?
Scenario.
Do you understand me? I was like, yeah, sorry.
That's so funny.
So I was actually a working comic 2.5 years later. And I was inviting people to the show. And I remember he walked up, was like, you have a show? I was like, yes, it's a real one. It's 90 minutes, tops, 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, you get tickets and you go, and I'm going to be third. You know exactly when I'm going. And he's like, I'll give you a chance. So that guy took 3 years to get him back to a show.
Amazing.
And afterwards he was like, I'm really glad you found that, Jose. That was really awesome. And I was like,
wow.
Redemption is mine.
That's so funny.
Because it was so bad. I didn't know how bringers worked.
Yeah.
And so it was a 4-hour show, and they would sprinkle in their working comics to keep the show going because all their new people were going to be terrible.
Yeah.
But whoever brought the most people went last because they wanted to keep the audience there. So I had 2 people. So they kept me around. Some people only brought 1, whatever. So I was one, I was not at the end. So I wasn't even at the end. which is terrible. So it was it's a hard experience when you're a stand-up comic, and I didn't mind. That whole experience was fun to me. I hated that I ruined that night for my friend.
Yeah. It was always tough for me when I would bring someone to a show and then they would just like say something innocuous, something like didn't mean anything after.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Wow, yeah, you wrote all that? You know, something. It's like, okay, you're being nice.
Yeah, they couldn't think of anything. They're just like,
Yeah.
that was a thing that we
Yeah.
just did. We just did a thing. Like, oh no, they hate
So
me.
that's what a show's like.
That's what a show's like. All right, nice. I don't have to do that again.
Did you ever have a friend you want to try stand-up as well?
I don't think I've ever had that. And I've tried mentoring young comics,
Right.
and they have never made it.
Try not to take that personally.
I don't like. I don't call it like a young comic that they're the next big thing. I'm not the person to call that. I've tried, and
The
I have
reverse intuition,
Yes,
yeah.
if I think you're good, you're probably not
You
good.
don't have it.
Well, there would be someone that I would see, and I would love their comedy, and I saw them in one particular setting, but that was the only setting that they did well on, even though I look for consistency. And then I took them to another show, and I vouched for them, and then they did not do well, and I was like, oh, I got a broken picker. I gotta go fix my picker.
That's so funny.
So I've had comedians like, could you help me write and mentor me? I was like, I will give you a warning that everyone that has asked me this before has left stand-up. So yes, I'll help you, but just realize I'm bad. I'm bad.
You're like the cursed Jedi master.
That's right.
All of his Padawans
All
die.
his Padawans end up becoming accountants for the Empire.
They're like, actually, yeah, the Empire makes a lot of
The
sense.
Empire,
It makes more
yeah,
sense
you
than
know
this.
what? I'm gonna go with that. You're a terrible teacher.
So then you were working comic, right?
Yeah.
And how do you find your way to the dry bar stage after?
Everything, and this is what I pass on to comics that have already gotten funny. That I can mentor, at least with the business side. But if you are just trying to get funny, apparently I'm terrible. But once you are funny and you want advice on the business, that's what I tell. It's like, I did not like networking. I don't like that. I don't like selling myself. I'd rather just let the work speak for itself.
Right.
But you have to learn that. That is an invaluable skill because Keith saw me, right, at the Seattle International Comedy Competition in 2009.
Was he living there at the time?
No,
or?
I think he was one of the judges.
Okay.
So they brought him in as one of the judges. And I took fourth. And I just didn't. I should have gotten higher than that, but I didn't play the finals very well.
Right.
And that's one of those things when you assess your strategy to beat all the other members of that group.
Yeah.
I didn't assess that. I was really the only one that was able to go clean and be funny. And if I had established that from the beginning, I could have done much better in the finals, but I didn't. And so, and then a couple things set me back. So, but he saw me one of the nights that I did really well. And so Keith invited me to the Rocky Mountain Laugh-Off in 2011, and then I won that. And then I did Wise Guys a couple times, and it's funny story. I went into Ogden, and I was doing my set at the time, and I noticed this one lady in the front. She would be laughing, and then she would go like this. And I was like, is that a tick or something? I don't know. I was about 15 minutes into my set. And every time, and then it's doing that periodically. And then I realized, I put two and two together. It's like every time I curse, it totally makes her not enjoy the experience. So I stopped cursing the rest of the set, and she laughed the whole time. And I came backstage, and afterwards I was like, yeah, that lady's really attached to cursing. And then the manager was like, yeah, you're not supposed to curse at this club.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, well, that's a memo you need to send.
Right.
And so I started. I thought that's why I stopped working for Wise Guys for a while, but I think it's just because I didn't push them that much. Right. But then years later, my manager was like, hey, they're doing dry bar. Do you want me to ask for you? I was like, yeah. And Keith was like, oh, of course. Because he remembered me from all that past that we had. And
Totally.
I probably could have engaged earlier to do it, but you see that step process that was like 11 years to get to that place. So every interaction you have, every show you do, every hand you shake can eventually become something.
Lead to an opportunity later.
Yeah. So
Cool.
that's how I got my TV show. Like almost everything I've ever been cast in, somebody wrote it for me.
Right.
And then I went in and auditioned, and they were like, like, wasn't he good? Like, yeah, he was amazing. And I was like, I wonder why they wrote the part for me, right? And so that's how I got to Dry Bar, just networking over a lot of years.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm wrong, but was that first special film 2020?
Yeah.
Before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
February 2020.
Wow. That is
My manager,
narrow margin.
after it happened, and they said, yeah, we're going to probably put it in the next season. And then they were like, that was really strong. We're going to try and get it at the end of this season. And I was like, oh, okay, good. That's a good sign. And my manager was getting word from them, and he was like, hey, when are you going to retire from the Air Force? And I was like, I don't know. I can retire whenever I want. It's just whenever it makes sense. And he's like, you should probably retire. This year is going to be huge. 2020 is going to be huge. And then everything shut down, and it was July, and we were trying to get streaming shows going, and like a streaming comedy set thing. And my manager was talking to me, and then at the end of the conversation, he's like, "It's a good thing you didn't retire from the Air Force." I was like, "Yeah. I've been working for 6 months on lieutenant colonel pay full time. Yeah, it's nice."
Yeah, close one.
Yeah, so now everybody's like, when are you going to leave the Air Force? Like when they pull me, like scraping through the rug. No, I don't want to leave. So that may be how it works out.
Well, that is great. And I mean, I feel like Dry Bar kind of had a huge thing, obviously, during the pandemic because everyone was home.
Right.
And we saw a lot of people were just like desperate for that live comedy experience.
Yeah.
Where they couldn't,
and then also
be live.
Forget about what was going on.
Totally.
I think it was interesting though. Like I always thought, if I was in isolation, that I would be so productive. I would learn languages, and I'd go back and really nail derivatives. I didn't ever get derivatives, so I'm gonna go back and just get on. I'm gonna bone up on my calculus. I wrote one joke in 6 months. I have a 45-second bit that I wrote in 6 months. So no, I was not very productive at all. But I eventually got back into writing, and we started streaming shows. And I was on the road September. It's the first live gig I did.
Sweet.
Right that year. So
did you do any Zoom shows in that time period?
I did. Yeah, I did a couple of Zoom shows. And
how were those?
I mean, I had done my own streaming show.
Okay.
Where it was like on YouTube, and I would prefer their comments. And I'd done the jokes so often that I knew when they were supposed to laugh, right? So I didn't really care. So we would do a Zoom show, and all the comedians like, hey, make sure your mic is on so we can hear your laughter. And then they get to me, I'm like, I don't care. Turn it off. I'd rather not hear your laughter.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to hear when you're
5 people.
I don't want to hear when your phone goes off. I don't want to hear when you get a phone call and you forget that you're on Zoom. I'd rather just mute it for me, just for me. And so it was an interesting experience. It was like I'm going to tell jokes at a business meeting. That's what Zoom was.
Kind of brought you back to those old days of testing out jokes on your coworkers.
Yes. Because I did a couple of like theme shows. So write specific material for this set. So not any of your old jokes, just the theme jokes. And that was, I think Zoom was perfect for that. Right. Because it's like this kind of like very low consequence open mic is what it worked out to be. So.
Well, that's great. And you were able to come back after the pandemic and do another special, which was...
Yeah, that was really great that they invited me back. And so the first one, I'd really done a lot of the family-friendly stuff. And so the second one, I was like, hey, I have 2 shows when I do like cruise ships. I have the family-friendly, and then I have clean for adults. Right. So it's... The kids can be there, but they're going to be like, I don't get it. Right. And so I thought, let's do that one for the second show. And so that's what Airplanes of Broken English was just like my adult clean set. So it had a little bit more adult material.
Right.
A lot less fart jokes.
Yeah.
That's how I break it up normally.
Fart joke. I got my 90 minutes of fart jokes.
That's right.
And then I got my
Yeah. Well, fart jokes at any time where I'm doing this, right, where I'm moving around, because people would email me what their kids were doing. I was like, what are children liking about my set? And there was a 2-year-old that they were like, what do you want on TV? Like, Blue Man. And that was me. That was in my blue shirt.
Blue Man.
Blue Man. And then there's a kid, and I talk about, the when I show up to that house in Texas, and the dad was like, we thought you was going to be like a real Jose.
Yeah.
And I was like, did you think I was coming in the door with maracas? I'm here to date your daughter, right? And this lady wrote me that her 5-year-old, whenever they go to a new house and the door opens, he walks in, I'm here to date your daughter. And he dances across the thing, and they're like, this is dry bar. So I've always been fascinated with what kids kind of attach themselves to when they watch my set. But I did it because it's visually, I'm moving around a lot.
Right,
it's
that physicality.
very animated, right?
Yeah.
So that's also part of the family friendly. Whereas the adult clean one is a lot more discussion and cerebral,
right?
Which sometimes it'll bore kids and stuff. So
yeah,
that's how I break it up when I'm doing shows, specifically multiple clean shows.
Cool.
And now I'm working on a new album, and it's going to be called No Way Jose. It's all nerdy topics. So I'm just going to talk about. It's a 1 hour essentially trying to be a funny TED Talk.
Oh, quick,
cool.
cool.
Because I grew up a nerdy kid, and so this is all going to be all my favorite material about aeronautical engineering and orbital dynamics and evolution and just all the topics that I find fascinating about science. So that's going to be the next album.
Wow, I'm excited for that. You're slowly. Each special's going up in
difficulty.
yeah, totally.
That's the whole plan. It's like eventually I'm going to be a mime. I'll do mime stand-up comedy. Just really challenge myself with this album.
Just come out and write equations.
The mime album, you have to watch it. The audio version is pretty slow.
Well, that is awesome. And I can't wait for the new special. Do you have any idea when that's...
I put a fire under my butt to get it written and recorded by November of 24.
Cool.
So that's the plan. I got about, it depends on the night. Obviously, it grows and expands. So I got about 12, 15 minutes of it written right now. And that's what I'm workshopping on the road, wherever I go. And so I got a bunch of venues where I have to be clean. So Ogden tomorrow, I'm on a cruise ship after this. And then got a bunch of kind of family-friendly locations that I'm going to be doing in January and all that. So I'll have a lot of opportunity to really try it out. And I feel bad for those audiences because you're going to be part of the process.
Well, yeah. So everybody keep an eye out for Jose's new album coming November potentially.
We'll record in November, so probably early 2025 will be out, and it'll be a audiovisual experience. So there'll be an audio version that you can just listen to it. It'll be fine. But then if you put the video in, it should be all of my audiovisual displays that I'll have during because explaining how a wing works is nice when you have a wing, right? And the orbital dynamics portion of it, you'll have the video there. So there'll be some graphics that you can look at. And so you can watch the video on your TV and then also listen to it when you're driving. And you should get roughly the same experience, but obviously it's more enriched when you see it visually.
Wow, that sounds... I'm really intrigued. That sounds fun.
So we'll see. Can I get an hour of it to be funny? We'll see.
Well, before we get out of here, Jose, is there anything else you want to plug more immediately? Or
you can go to josesarduy.com, JOSESARDUY.com for my schedule and how everything's going. I'm going to be putting out a new merchandise page with this T-shirt will go on sale again, and then hopefully I'll have a No Way Jose, the tour shirt with all the tour dates in the back once the album is done and I tour that album, which will be in 24. I do not have a merch page now. I had an old one that I have erased 3 times, but people are still ordering stuff. I don't know how you find it. I'm telling you, kids, when you put something on the internet, it never goes away. I know, because I'm still getting orders. I honor the orders, but I write them back like, hey, how did you find this page? And they're like, I just Googled it. And I was like, I've Googled it, and I don't see it come up. So I don't have a merch page, but I will hopefully set that up in the next next first quarter of next year. So that should be ready. So those are the big things right now. And then
Sweet.
Can't really talk about the specifics, but I got picked up for a show as a regular on one of the streaming networks. We got approved for 8 episodes, so I will be.
Congratulations!
Thank you. So I will be on a show. Details to follow. So keep an eye out at josesarduy.com or any of my social media pages, which is just at Jose Sarduy, JoseSarduy.
Awesome. Well, I think this is the end of our time here. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Jose.
Thank
It
you.
was
It's
awesome
always,
to talk
it's
with
always
you.
great to come to Provo.
You probably have come to Provo more in your life than you
I
ever
know.
thought possible.
Everybody's so nice here. It is nice. I think they want you to come back. That's what they do it for.
We do.
Right? Yeah.
We do.
Please come back to Provo. We have curse words in one place, only on somebody's headphones. Otherwise, no cursing. It's really nice for the
right.
family.
And if you do, we'll frown.
That's a nice that man.
Frown
that
politely.
man, what darkness is inside?
We'll know
of
that
him
you can do better.
that he has to use those words. That's so.
Well, thank you, Jose, for
Thank you for
joining
having
us.
me. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, Drive Our Comedy podcast viewers. Make sure to check our website out for new specials and merch, and we will catch you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Everybody's so nice.